Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start shortly. Please take your seats. Sorry, please switch off this music and we are starting. I would like to open the last session for today. The session is about the international coordination of ICT measurement, 10th anniversary of partnership on measuring ICT for development. I would like to introduce you moderator, Mr. David Sauter, and I give the floor to Mr. David to moderate this session. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. This session is about the international coordination of ICT measurement and especially the work of the partnership on measuring ICT for development. Now, this is the 10th birthday of the partnership, more or less. It was formed in 2004 in between the two sessions of the World Summit on the Information Society. And it's played a very important role since then in coordinating work within the United Nations to develop ICT statistics and particularly to work around the WSIS targets. So amongst that work, the development of core indicators for ICTs, work which has continued over the years and which is summarized in this leaflet, which is on desks in front of you. Work to develop manuals for the gathering and analysis of data, and also this extremely heavy book, the WSIS Final Targets Review, which was published earlier this year. So those different areas of activity, and there we go. In the session today, I have the opportunity to explore some of the work which has been done by the partnership, and it's also an opportunity for you to contribute your views on what should be the priorities of the partnership as it moves forward into the future. So we'll look at lessons learned, at the challenges that have been identified over the past 10 years, and at the future direction of the partnership's work. I've had the pleasure of working with the partnership quite a bit over the years, in particular on this report on the Final WSIS Targets Review. And I think it's been an excellent organization and it's done excellent work. But its work has also demonstrated some real limitations to the data. And I was struck, we've just had a session about the superabundance of data that can emerge from big data. But actually one of the problems that the partnership has had is the scarcity of data. So we've had data sources that have been much less available, much less substantial, much less reliable than we would have liked them to have been over the past 10 years. And a second problem is that the pace of change in technology and markets is so fast that it's very difficult to establish meaningful benchmarks and to maintain data sets that last over an extended period of time. Indeed, many of the technologies and services that we now take for granted didn't exist at the time that the WSIS targets were established. And thirdly, I think it's been very clear that it's difficult to measure the demand side of the sector. Much easier to measure the supply side. It's much easier to measure inputs than to measure impacts, with the result that we need to guard against a risk that we measure the things that we can measure rather than the things we really need to measure or really want to measure. So I think those are sort of three themes that perhaps will come out of the discussion today. I did think of sort of just briefly summarizing some of the things that it seems to me, someone who works with policymakers using data, what do policymakers really want? And then ask the question about how might the partnership address those issues. I think policymakers want more reliable and more extensive data than are currently available. They want more granularity so that they can understand gender differences and other socioeconomic differences better than they do at present. They want more reliable longitudinal data sets so that they can focus on trends. But they also want data that respond to the very recent developments that have taken place in the ICT sector. They want data in front of them on their desks much more quickly so that it doesn't go out of date before they can respond to it. And above all, I think they want data on the demand side as well as on the supply side, so that we're not just measuring the number of computers that go into schools, we're measuring the extent to which that has an impact on educational attainment levels and the relationship between that and other factors such as teacher quality. So I think those are the sort of things that policymakers are looking for from the partnership and from other data sources. With those data, we're better equipped to make effective use of ICTs in the development context and better equipped to understand inclusiveness and marginalization. And I think one thing that was particularly striking the session this morning is the importance of the distinction between mobile subscriptions and unique mobile subscribers, and how much, if we are to address issues of inclusiveness, how really central that question is. So three challenges, I think, emerge from this. For the partnership, how can it evolve the framework of targets and indicators it has in order to address the context of rapidly changing technology and markets? For the partnership's relationship with national statistical offices and other official data sources, how can they be encouraged to gather more data more effectively? What needs to be done to stimulate capacity? And for the partnership's relationship with other non-official data sources, such as ICT businesses, such as, for example, GSMA, as illustrated this morning. How can the immense volumes of data which commercial businesses now have be made or how can they contribute to better public policy development? So, to address those questions, we have 6 experts, and I will ask each of them I'll introduce them as they speak. I'll ask each of them to speak for 5 minutes, mostly on one particular question. And then after that, we'll have a general debate and a discussion in which the key question will be, what are your priorities for the future work of the partnership? So a discussion, I think, with comments and ideas about priorities rather than questions to the panel. The first panelist is Susan Telcher, who's head of the ICT Data and Statistics Division of the Telecoms Development Bureau in the ITU, which is, of course, responsible for most of the work we're discussing here this week. Susan's been with the ITU since 2008, but she's not, therefore, an ITU lifer. Before that, she was with another partnership agency with UNCTAD. And she's going to talk about the ITU's role in the partnership and also draw lessons from the past 10 years of chasing those targets and working together within the UN and with other organizations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last session of the day, so I'm very happy to see that many of you still have a lot of energy to come and engage in the discussion. I'm here as one of the steering committee members of the Partnership on Measuring ICT for Development, together with Scarlett von der Gill. She's sitting over there from UNCTAD, so we are sort of representing the partnership on this panel. And before I start, I would like to draw your attention to 2 things. One is this document that has been distributed. It should be on your table. It was, in fact, prepared by Scarlett, so I would like to acknowledge that. I think it's a very nice overview of some of the major achievements of the partnership. And on the very first page, you can also see the 14 members of the partnership with whom we are cooperating closely in this work. I would also, if the moderator agrees, to put back the slideshow that we just stop, because that has been also prepared by Scarlett, and it gives you a very nice impression of some of the activities of the partnership, and I would suggest to just run it a little bit in the background on the screens without the music, if possible. So if somebody could look into that. Thank you very much. It is a nice collection of pictures of the various trainings and other things that the partnership has done. And since we are not going to recall all the activities now that the partnership has been undertaking over the past 10 years, you will get an impression from that slideshow and from this paper. Okay, let me say a few words at the beginning before we later get into discussions. And the first question in terms of ITU's role in the partnership, I mentioned that we are one of the members of the steering committee of the partnership. And I should also say that ITU is one of the founding members of the partnership 10 years ago. So we have been involved with the partnership from the very beginning when it was launched in 2004 at the UNCTAD conference. And for ITU, the partnership has been a very important community to advance the work on ICT statistics. So in fact, in all the work we do on ICT statistics, we try to cooperate very closely with other partners in the delivery of our training activities, in the work on methodologies and indicators. We have also been very active in the work related to the World Summit on the Information Society and its measurement. We will hear about that later more from Professor Minkin. But ITU has been leading the task group in the partnership on this particular activity. And we have also pushed quite hard to get ICT statistics in the United Nations Statistical Commission agenda, which was not there before, and used that as a very important channel to raise the awareness about ICT statistics in the international statistical community. So ITU has been very involved in reporting to the Statistical Commission and also in coordinating the input documents to that body. And then, of course, today, or this meeting here is also another testimony of our involvement with the partnership. At each WTIS, we are featuring one session coordinated jointly with the partnership. We have done this in the past as well, to bring to the attention of the ITU statistical community other topics that perhaps we don't discuss in ITU, but that are very important for ICT measurement. We have had sessions on e-waste, on measuring the economic impact. We had a lot on gender over the past 2 years. So we are using WTIS also to share with you the work that is done by the partnership. I would like to make a couple of points in terms of some of the lessons learned over the past 10 years. And since ITU and also me personally have been involved with this for the entire period of the partnership. And I would like to focus primarily on the core objective of the partnership, which is to enhance the availability of internationally comparable indicators and statistics. This was at the beginning the reason why we said we need to work together to ensure that ICT indicators that can be compared internationally will become more available. So, okay, your slides are up, very good. So I don't have to go through our achievements, but one of the main successes of the work of the partnership, which I need to mention in order to make my other comments, is the core list of ICT indicators. We have done a lot of work on defining new indicators, agreeing on the methodologies, and disseminating and training the statistical community on these indicators so that the data that are collected nationally can be compared. So I think in that sense, we can really say a lot has been achieved. We have now a very good set of core indicators that have been developed. We have also a set of indicators to measuring the WSIS targets There are associated manuals, handbooks, frameworks, and so on and so forth that are ready to use. And this has been a very important part of the work of the partnership. However, producing statistics is a very timely undertaking, and introducing new statistics in data collections is also a lengthy process, as all of you very well know. So we should be really happy with the impressive improvements of the data collection in terms of ICT that we have seen over the past 10 years. In fact, one of the successes was also because ICT indicators were included in the United Nations handbook on the population and housing censuses, which led actually to the fact that during the 2010 round of census, a lot of countries included ICT indicators, and that helped in some countries to establishing a baseline. So, but what we have also seen is that this is not enough, because despite all the work on the methodologies and the indicators, we still have a major issue on data availability. We all know that, we have heard it, it will come up today again in the discussion. And therefore, I would really recommend that we have to focus more on data availability in countries and what is at the core of the issue of not sufficient data on ICT statistics that are available at country level, and somehow refocus the work of the partnership to pay more attention to that, in addition to the work we are doing on indicators and defining new indicators. And this is one of the key areas I think we should focus on in the future. What we have also noticed, and that is related to data availability, that unless the data are collected by an international agency, it is very difficult to encourage the data collection in countries. And I invite everybody to talk about this later on. For data, for example, collected by ITU, collected by UNCTAD on the e-business side, collected by UNESCO on the education indicators, there is a constant interaction with the countries, there's capacity building, there's a lot of work with countries, and for those areas, the data are better. But for areas where we don't have, for example, on e-government, the partnership has developed a list of e-government indicators, a manual, definitions, methodologies. There's no UN agency collecting that at the international level, and there's no data availability at the international level, and very little is going on in countries. So this is another observation that we have from this work that is important to address. So in terms of the data production and the increasement of the data production, one point that we have started to look at is national coordination. We have heard, even in this room, we have the operators, we have the regulators, we have the statistical officers, we have the line ministries. If we go beyond the ITU indicators, we have other line ministries, education and health and labor and what have you. So data is, ICT is spread across the different agencies and ministries. And this is one issue that we have found when working with countries that sometimes can impede on the collection of data in countries. And another point is funding. There's very little money that goes into ICT statistics at the national level and at the international level. So that is something that we have observed over the years. ICT statistics is not mainstreamed and therefore gets, the big money at the national level that is often allocated to population or agriculture or other areas. So that's one of the issues that also makes it more difficult in terms of the data collection. So I will finish by just looking ahead and making the link to the discussions yesterday and today about looking for alternative data sources. I think the partnership should also start to look at that in the different areas and see what are some other data sources that could be explored together with the countries to address this issue of data availability and improve the data in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really good introduction to the history and in particular some of the critical challenges that face the partnership going forward. And I'm going to turn now to Scarlett von der Gilles, who's from UNCTAD, from the ICT analysis section of UNCTAD, where her work includes measurement of e-business and also work on the Information Economy Report, one of the important annual publications from that agency. I'll ask Scarlett to give an UNCTAD perspective on the past 10 years, and I think you're going to begin with kind of the origins of the partnership.
Thank you, David. Yes, I thought I would give a little, maybe I should have said something before Susan, because she did already give quite a good overview of the history of the partnership until now. But just to put it into context, for those of you that haven't heard of us yet, because we've been coming to this meeting over several years, the partnership was launched officially in June 2004 at the UNCTAD Quadriennial Conference that took place in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. It was every 4 years, and we took advantage of the fact that there were so many heads of state, ministries, important people gathered together, so many countries gathered together to launch the partnership. But the conversation had been going on already informally between the different organizations, in particular the first comers to the partnership, which were ITU, UNCTAD, OECD, for the 4 regional commissions of the United Nations that have developing countries in their constituency, as well as the World Bank, and what then was the UN ICT task force, which does not exist anymore. In any case, this conversation was initiated along with the World Summit on the Information Society, which took place, the very first summit in 2003, because there were targets set up for advancing the information society, but we realized that in terms of supporting policies to that end, we had no data. In some areas, there was data. ITU had a long-standing collection of infrastructure and access data, but there was no information on the use of ICT, either by households or individuals, and even less on use by enterprises. There was not good enough data on the ICT sector, in particular on the value added of the ICT sector and its importance to employment. There was no data on ICT in education, no data on ICT in government. There were so many data gaps that were directly linked to the targets of that World Summit. So the international organization started talking about pooling resources and trying to tackle this and monitor progress in the information society. Since 2004, a lot has changed. We could have never imagined that the state of the information society would have reached the pervasiveness that exists now. And we have recognized, even though we've worked very hard, we have recognized challenges ahead. There is a need for continued awareness raising, preaching the gospel of linking official statistics to policy, which was at the very origin of the partnership. Governments change, statisticians less so because they're technical people, but there needs to be a constant reminder of the importance of having ICT statistics and link it to policies that aim not only at advancing ICT, but at advancing ICT for development. The need is especially flagrant for developing countries. In the case of UNCTAD, we're still pushing for countries to try and collect data on ICT use by enterprises. It says so much about how the current technology and innovation trends can impact the economies and economic growth of countries. And we don't have enough data from developing countries in this sense. So we want to continue raising awareness that ICT statistics should be a strategic tool for policymakers. Business people are very enthusiastic about results-based management, about having data to determine a baseline, because if you don't know where you're coming from, you cannot assess the progress that you've done. Having data at regular periods to be able to see progress and also to compare with other peers around you. and eventually to use that data to measure the impact, and not in isolation, but also combining ICT statistics and ICT data with other sets of data, because there you will have really added value in the analysis of the impact of ICT. So as an international organization focusing on trade, but also as a member of the partnership and looking at the overall situation of ICT statistics, I guess our main lesson learned is that we need to keep working. As ICT grows and becomes more pervasive, the need to measure it and to leverage ICT increases, and we need statistics for that. So we don't, even though we have a lot of work to do, we don't foresee that work ending at no time in the near future. And I hope I'll have some more chance to talk later about that, and I'll respect time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's two of the principal agencies within the partnership, their different perspectives. The third panelist is Jose Tavera, who's Director of DevStat, and who's also been involved with the partnership's work right from the beginning. He's worked on the identification of the core list of indicators back at the start of the process. He prepared the stock-taking of indicators for the second of the WSIS summits in 2005. He was a principal author for the UNCTAD and ITU manuals on statistics for the information economy and relevant household studies. So a great deal of experience over the partnership's work. And so can you give us your perspective?
Thank you very much, David. I have a presentation with 3 slides. I don't know if someone can put it on the screen. I'm trying to stick to the 5 minutes that the moderator gave me. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this conference. I wanted to just present 3 slides, but the first one is about my personal experience, because I want to tell you that I'm really proud of having been involved in the work of the partnership since the very beginning, and I would like to thank especially Susan and Scarlett for that. And I would like to say that of the many projects, many international projects I've been involved, this one is probably the most successful and the one that has, in fact, produced better impacts. From 2004, when we started working, and the number of countries with surveys on ICT use in households and businesses was really small, to the current situation, the improvement is impressive. So I would like to congratulate the institutions that have been involved in this. I don't know how can I change. Is there any?
Oh, okay.
To where? Okay. So it has been an extremely rewarding experience to work on the methodology, on the development of methodology, but I would like to say that probably the most interesting experience was the capacity building activities. We organized with different organizations in UNCTAD, ITU, and others, several regional training events, which have been, in fact, I would say the vehicle for transferring the know-how of more advanced countries, countries with more statistical development, to those countries that had no experience. So we had events, training events in almost all regions of the world. And one of the interesting experiences was to have training of trainers events. We had one training of trainers in Geneva years ago, and one in Valencia a couple of years ago. And now some of the trainers that participated in these events have been now training other colleagues in other parts of the world. I know that UNCTAD is now organizing one in Kazakhstan with a Russian-speaking expert who was precisely in the event of Valencia. So, as I said before, I'm really happy to appear in many of the pictures that Scarlett was showing. But going to the topic of this presentation, I would like to mention 5 lessons learned and then 4 areas of future work. The first lesson learned is that it is really efficient to have ready-to-use statistical instruments, such as questionnaires, definition of indicators, even data editing rules or tabulation plans. To be able to provide to a country which is starting, to be able to provide to them with a full package, complete package, to start a survey is a really useful tool. In the European Union, we are very much used to have working groups of all the member states, and it's very easy to contact your Danish colleague or your Swedish colleague, your French colleague, and get the questionnaire very easily and get the manual and get everything. But in countries where the contacts with other colleagues is not so frequent, these kind of materials are really efficient. The second lesson learned is about the organization of regional working groups. I have had my doubts in the past about the usefulness of having countries grouped by geographical regions and not by levels of statistical capacity. I think that having countries grouped from regions, in some regions it's efficient because they share a language. That's the experience, for instance, in the Latin American region. Most countries share the same language, so the question that has been used in one country can be ready for use in another one. The problems are very similar because they have a similar environment, the business sector, in the social sector. In other regions, this has not been so easy because they don't share the same language, but that's an issue to explore. In any case, it has allowed that countries with low statistical capacity have caught up very quickly with countries that had this capacity. The third lesson learned is about statistical quality. I'm not going to elaborate on this because we already had. I'm very happy to see that now there is a work program on the documentation of quality. I would like to see in the next future something like standard quality reports for ICT statistics to be used by all the countries in the different ICT areas, as it exists, for instance, now in the European Union for all statistical domains. Another interesting lesson is that the partnership has put together institutions with subject matter expertise, and this has allowed to work in parallel, extending the list of indicators into different domains. So we have UNCTAD, which is specialized in information economy, ITU in telecommunications, UNESCO in education, and so on and so on. And this makes the difference with other international working groups. For instance, when we are in working groups of Eurostat, we are all statisticians, but we are not subject matter specialists. So we are specialists in measurement, not in IT. The final lesson learned is that international recognition gives a stamp, gives a quality stamp. So submitting the methodological developments to the UN Statistical Commission gives, in fact, strong support to the work done. So now about the future priorities, I think that one of the main issues is that in the post-2015 goals, one is to decrease inequalities among and within countries. And if we talk about within countries, we need to work about geographical breakdown of data. I know that international organizations are not used to work with subnational data, but I think that in the case of some countries, especially largest countries, it is very important to start breaking down the data by not only by urban and rural, but also by the different regions of the country. It's also important because only if you have detailed data, you can link to geographical features, which in fact are a condition for the deployment of ICT infrastructures. Second priority for the future is analysis of the impact. In fact, there are doubts whether ICT are widening or narrowing the differences, the gaps. So the question is, do official statistics represent the good instrument for measuring impacts? Like, for instance, panel surveys or longitudinal surveys where you follow a cohort of people, and this is not yet in place, or behavioral experiments which have a very different methodology. Third priority is increase the use of statistics. We have increased the production, now we need that these statistics are used, because they are very costly and we have a big treasury of data. So for this, we need to increase the accessibility of microdata, and there are already international initiatives like the International Household Survey Network or the Accelerated Data Program to document the microdata sets. And it is very important to integrate these microdata across different surveys. For instance, surveys on ICT use can be linked with labor force surveys or with household expenditure or living condition surveys. And this kind of statistical analysis has to be carried out. But for this, we need to increase the capacity of users. Not all ministries of ICT have statisticians able to do this kind of analysis. Finally, I would like to say that some kind of country-specific conditions should be taken into account for the development of international benchmarks. You cannot compare Brazil, which is a huge country in Latin America, with a small Central American country, even if they are in the same region and they are put together in a table comparing the indicators. So we have to take into account that countries have different organization of the economy. Some countries have a huge share of the informal economy, and there are no studies about that. Some countries are prevalent with micro businesses, etc. And the geography of country is also important. The connectivity of the territory is not the same in a small round country like Macedonia or in a very long country like Chile. So these are things that have to be taken into account. So thank you very much. And again, thanks Susan, thanks Scarlett for having involved me since the very beginning. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. There's a lot of really interesting and useful material in that presentation. Two very brief announcements before the next panelist. Firstly, obviously we started the session significantly late, and we will therefore go on a little later than would previously have been scheduled. Secondly, the speaker who will follow the next panelist will be speaking in Spanish. So I would like to ask the organizers to make sure that in about 5 minutes' time, that there is Spanish to English translation available. Thank you. So the next speaker is Vladimir Minkin, who I suspect is very well known to many people here, as he's been going to ITU meetings since 1975. But particularly importantly, and that was in your biography, in the brochure. But I think particularly here, he's chair of the ITU Council Working Group on the World Summit on the Information Society, and he was chair of the WSIS Plus 10 multi-stakeholder preparatory process, which led to the high-level event that took place in June this year. He will therefore talk about the measurement of WSIS outcomes, World Summit outcomes, and the vision of WSIS beyond 2015, which was agreed at that high-level event. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, let me congratulate you in partnership with 10 years jubilee. And let me congratulate Georgian authorities and ITU, especially ITUD, for organization of this, I think, very important, excellent, and interesting symposium, and express my sincere thanks to Georgian colleagues for their famous traditional Georgian hospitality. Thank you. Dear colleagues, when we are developing something, we must know what situation is at each stage of development process and what the results of its implementation are. In the Tunis agenda, this is called for periodic evaluation using an agreed methodology and emphasized that appropriate indicators and benchmarking should clarify the magnitude of digital divide in both its domestic and international dimensions and keep it under regular assessment. It was also stressed that all indexes and indicators must take into account different level of development and natural circumstances. And the further development of these indicators should be undertaken in collaborative, cost-effective, and non-duplicative fashion. This requirement still valid, and work on the development of new indicators and enhancing existing ones shall be continued. Since 2004, the partnership has helped improve the availability and quality of ICT data and indicators, enhanced the statistical capacity of governments, and coordinated the work of UN and other relevant international agencies in the collection of ICT data. Starting from 2007, partnership and ITU, together with other stakeholders, produce annual Measuring the Information Society report that identifies key ICT developments and tracks the cost and affordability of ICT services in accordance with internationally agreed methodologies. Final VCS target review, achievements, challenges, and way forward was launched in June 2014 at the VCS Plus 10 high-level opening segment. At each VCS forum, the partnership held a special session on measuring ICT for development. These materials were, among other background documents in preparation through multi-stakeholder preparatory platform, the VCS Plus 10 high-level event outcome documents, VCS Plus 10 statement of implementation of VCS outcomes, and VCS Plus 10 vision for VCS beyond 2015. These documents, endorsed by the ITU Plenipotential Conference on this October, provide a set of fresh priorities for joint action oriented towards the further development of global ICT ecosystem while focusing on the power of ICTs for facilitating development. Considerable achievements have been made since the VCS. However, numerous challenges remain. Moreover, the ICT landscape and their users have continued to evolve, and new challenges and opportunities have emerged. The detailed challenges and new priority areas to be addressed in the implementation of VCS outcomes beyond 2015 you can find in the VCS Plus 10 outcome documents. In these priority areas, it was stated for ICT measurements, developing agreed goals and time-based measurable targets, data and indicators, along with enhanced monitoring and reporting, encourage the ongoing assessments on progress towards the information society as envisaged in the VCS outcomes, including through efforts such as the Partnership on Measuring ICT for Development, which has been essential for evaluating the implementation of VCS action lines. And in this respect, it is necessary to continue to develop appropriate ways and means to make such measurements. The result of measurement should provide necessary feedback for all involved parties, including international and regional organizations, governments, private sector, financial organization, academia, etc. What is crucially important, that collected data shall be reliable and constantly updated. The work of the partnership is much close to other VCS activities, such as VCS taking database maintained by ITU and the VCS project prices initiatives that has been launched by ITU with the involvement of all action line facilitators. ITU Telecommunication Development Sector, the organizer of this event, not only deeply involved in common work with the partnership, but is the leading ITU sector on implementation of VCS outcomes. The result of ICT implementation measurement are used in establishing objectives and outcomes for ITUD strategic and operational plans, programs, assistance to developing countries, and countries after disaster events, regional initiative, and study group activities. Exchange and sharing of information on the implementation of VCS action lines, developing recommendations and guidance, reporting on good practice, success stories, and examples of the ICT projects on a regular basis became an important process for building capacities necessary to accelerate implementation of VCS activities, bridging digital divide, and achievement of development goals. The current indicators are based on VCS target, former VCS target. Some targets were difficult to measure, in particular in the developing countries that still struggle to collect ICT-related statistics, even of the simplest ones. Thanks to the partnership, significant progress has been made on this, but more work is needed in order to improve the availability and quality of data. And on this issue, we have heard excellent report from Mike in the previous session, as well as in other presentations. to enable the monitoring and evaluation of ICT's development post-2015 and their impact of the future development agenda, the identification of policy-relevant and forward-looking goals and targets that reflect priority areas for policy making are needed. At MPP Visis Plus 10 inputs, it was proposed that goals and targets should be ambitious but realistic, time-bound, concrete, and measurable. Be able to track progress, identify shortcomings, and evaluate existing, and help identify new policies, based on the assessment of historical and current trends of progress. The indicators should be clear and easy to understand for policymakers and other stakeholders, and relevant to policy intervention. Where possible, they should be based on internationally agreed statistical standards. Examples of targets for each action lines have been proposed to MPP Visis Plus 10 by action line facilitators. But unfortunately, after a long discussion at MPP, this proposal had not been agreed, and it was decided that each UN agency should develop targets under its area of responsibility, if any. In this regard, a recent ITU Plenipotential Conference approved the new Connect 2020 agenda for global telecommunication ICT development, including global goals and targets for each of strategic goals of the ITU. I invite all other UN agencies, their members, to accompany ITU in establishing of new or update VISIS targets under their responsibility and under above-mentioned criteria and commit to implementation. The partnership should take a coordination role in identifying and disseminating relevant statistical standards, concept, and classification, and to continue to involve and interact closely with national statistics offices, relevant ministers, and specialized agencies, as well as other relevant VISIS stakeholders. VISIS Plus 10 high-level event encourage all stakeholders to contribute to and close collaborate with the partnership as an international multi-stakeholder initiative to improve the availability and quality of ICT data and indicators, particularly in developing countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And it's really important to have that perspective from the WSIS Plus 10 process as part of this discussion. Can I just clarify, do we have the Spanish to English translation? Yeah, okay. So there are two more speakers, and as I said, we started 45 minutes later than the original planned starting time for the session, so we will go on to have space for discussion. I'd like to ask the two last speakers if they could keep to the 5 minutes if possible. So the first of these is Gerardo Lopez, who's Director of Science and Technology Statistics in Mexico's National Institute of Statistics and Geography. And he also participates in the Latin American Regional Observatory, OSILAC, which is concerned with the measurement of ICTs. So he will comment on issues from the perspective of his region, success stories, challenges, and the particular importance of the regional dimension.
Gracias, David. Bueno, primero quiero agradecer a la UIT la invitación a participar en esta mesa. Cuando me invitaron a participar, me preguntaban, me sugerían como tema de mi participación, cómo podríamos evaluar el trabajo del partnership como un caso de éxito, como un caso exitoso. Yo lo que voy a tratar de platicarles en estos minutos es mi percepción en el ámbito del trabajo del partnership en América Latina. Primero quiero comenzar diciendo que para mí ha sido un caso de éxito. El partnership para mí generó un modelo de trabajo que debe ser replicado, no solo en el tema de las TIC, sino en cualquier otro tema para el desarrollo de estadísticas. ¿Por qué considero que el partnership ha hecho un trabajo estos 10 años exitoso en América Latina? En primer lugar, generó un cambio de paradigma respecto a lo que podíamos obtener de las estadísticas de TICS. Antes de la cumbre y antes del trabajo del partnership, La medición de las tecnologías de la información era como medir computadoras y medir fierros, ¿sí? Sin ninguna trascendencia social y económica de esa medición. Precisamente el partnership nos introdujo a considerar lo que actualmente es un concepto ya muy difundido, que es sociedad de la información. Antes del trabajo del partnership era cuantificar computadoras, cuantificar kilómetros de fibra óptica, era medir cuál era la infraestructura de tecnologías en los países, pero como tener una cuantificación más. A partir del partnership, cuantificamos eso porque sabemos que todas esas variables
processes undergoing in this sphere, demographic, economic situation of our population. We have obtained very good data in this regard, and the first change which took place, it was change of paradigms, as it has already been mentioned. I would also like to emphasize that within the frames of the work undertaken by partnership, we developed methodologies for standardizing, which enabled us finally to define standard indicators, and in order to be able to evaluate what kind of a country we are and compare our situation with the standing of different countries in the world. From the beginning, the work seemed very complex, very difficult, because all countries have their own technologies and methodologies in this field, in the communications field, and we could not imagine clearly the definitions, the concepts, because all countries were evaluating different indicators based on their own methodology. But finally, to my mind, we have come up to the point that we managed to accumulate quite good database, and based on the partnership cooperation, we achieved quite a lot of progress. In statistics of digital economy, research of digital economy proved to be very productive, and we did it on the basis of different types of social questioning, inquiries, and we obtained quite good and tangible results, and we even were able to undertake comparative work. I would also like to emphasize the results of partnership, which were involved in the work of many statistical services, and many statistical services worldwide, they have elaborated the standards characteristic to each respective country and with respect to different topics. But in general, creation of statistical data, particularly on ICTs, is connected with demographic, economic data which we have obtained. What is the most important thing? We have to be able to somehow evaluate correctly the bulk of work sort of executed by us. And in this process, we were sort of living in two different worlds. In the world without ICT statistics, and the world with the statistics in place. Therefore, I would like to emphasize that now the time has come when we can speak more precisely about the challenges, about the work that has already been done with regard to developing ICT technologies in our country. What is also very important, this is the financing side of the whole thing, because within this partnership work we discovered that we encountered financial difficulties, and not only once. But finally, I would like to touch upon the final point of my presentation. Actually, the work done by partnership, which is, the statistics and processing, data and turning it into statistical data. And for this, of course, this kind of fora, this kind of gatherings are instrumental in discovering the challenges, difficulties. We must not really skip them, of course, and we need to really acquaint ourselves more closely with the achievements of different countries. This is how I would like to summarize my short presentation, to say that, of course, within the frames of partnership, which I deem very successful. Thank you, Didi Madloba.
Presentation. To expedite things further and have a seamless transition after the final panelist, perhaps while she is speaking, could those of you who would like to make a contribution from the floor raise your flags in the holders? So the final panelist is someone you met earlier today, it's Alison Gilwald, who is the Executive Director of Research ICT Africa, the leading ICT research center in Africa, and also adjunct professor at the University.
და ასევე კეიპტაუნის უნივერსიტეტის დოცენტი. იგი მოგვაწვის მისხედვას აფრიკულ რეგიონულ ხედვის თვალსაზრისით და იმედი მაქვს რომ კონკრეტ
Fortunate because something else I might have wanted to say. Thank you very much, David, and thank you to Susan and the ITU and UNCTAD team and the partnership, because I really do think that there has been a big effort under the partnership to seek out these pockets of information that did exist outside the formal system and to use it to inform and supplement some of the gaps and some of the errors in the existing data that was there. So I do want to thank you for that and for continuing to give us the opportunity to engage. I'm going to say a quick word just about Research ICT Africa, which I think many of you may not be familiar with, but we started this work actually as sort of its genesis aligns with the start of WSIS, but it wasn't really that reason. It was just I actually came out of the regulator, the first term in the South African regulator, and wished to set up a fast track some professional development and do some policy and regulatory evidence work, and discovered that there just really wasn't any evidence to work with in terms of ICT policy. And so we, with some really extensive support from IDRC, from Canadian Aid, set up a supply-side study initially, trying to assist new regulators in Africa with getting out supply-side data very quickly, understanding what rights they had or what rights they should have in order to demand certain information in order to make better policy and regulation. And try and help them extract that information from operators who have been recalcitrant largely in providing that data. We've established templates and mechanisms and now automated interfaces for regulators to get that information so that operators can put it confidentially into their networks, etc. And although this has been done in a number of jurisdictions, largely they've failed. So within a year of us actually setting these up, they haven't been updated, and the data, is redundant and not much use. And the same, similar thing has happened on the demand side. We found very quickly that the supply side data, which we were able to collect, especially in this dynamic mobile environment, was far more up to date, far quicker, that we could get that information to regulators and to decision makers than the pipeline that it took for the information to come through the ITU and back into the nation states, etc. So we were able to get that information out very quickly and able to inform the indicator process at ITU, particularly around definitions and what was happening with multiple SIMs and subscribers and that sort of thing, which we've engaged in very fruitfully, I think. On the demand side, we began to realize that we really need to understand the points of policy intervention. We had to participate and assist countries who had been signatories to the Geneva Plan of Action and had committed to undertaking the Measuring the Information Society efforts, that we needed to support those. We started off, we did originally 7 African countries. At its height, that was in almost a decade ago. At its height, 6 years ago now, we had 17 African countries. It was meant to be 18, but unfortunately Egypt dropped out. 17 African countries, Francophone, countries, 5 Francophone countries, Central Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. And we're really, for the first time, able to get some sense of what was really happening with regard to ICTs and about the very different evolution of mobile markets in Africa and the regulatory responses required for those. Unfortunately, as we sit here today, 10 years on, we went down to 12 surveys after the economic recession and global funding cuts. We went down to 12 surveys in 2012. And next year, we've managed to solicit 50% funding for 3 countries, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, where we've had some indication either from the regulator or the ministry that they would be prepared to co-fund. So, you know, I'm trying not to be as pessimistic and a little more supportive, but I think as far as Africa is concerned, we're in a position where, you know, the issues around even, you know, informal sector surveys, etc., which we've been doing as well, just because that is actually where the bulk, where a lot of the African economies actually survive and exist. This work is simply not going to be done unless there is an effort to implement these surveys beyond simply training, providing templates, short-term support. So the issue I really want to tackle is, or talk a little bit more about is Susan's question about what is actually at the core of our inability to get this data from certain countries, from developing countries in particular. And I should add that it's some emerging economies that are the worst culprits in terms of not providing this data. They do have the resources, but they questions around institutional endowments and information and evidence-based policy ethoses that need to be challenged and affected. So unless we actually find a way of pooling our resources and collectively supporting the implementation of particularly the demand-side surveys, I think we're going to find ourselves back when we come back to review where we are in a few years' time, possibly further back than we've been in the past. So I really want to call on us to do that. I just want to say that in terms of looking forward, I think what has happened with these gaps that have been created with the global recession primarily, but for a number of other reasons, in terms of public data being clawed back or not produced, is that a number of private companies and private companies' data has been used to try and fill this public information gap. And I want us to embrace all sources of data that we can get. But I think we have to think very carefully about where we get the data, how we get the data, and ensure that that data is created and made available in a way that makes sure that it is a public good, that there is access to that data. I think the effect of this is that, I think the effect of this is that some of the institutional capacity building that needs to take place for this to be, to ensure that we have this data for good evidence-based policy in future has actually been eroded by the private sector's production of this information in ways that is not always rigorous and sometimes quite flawed. And I think we need to, as I say, embrace it, but engage it in a way that we can use our methodologies, our rigor, our credibility within our own institutions, within universities in Africa, within national regulatory agencies, to set up the framework, especially as we go into the big data environment, to ensure that the information is rigorous, is open, and is accessible to the public. And that goes for the national statistics offices too. The few that are actually doing these demand-side surveys, often the data sets are not available for further research, or they're delayed by so long, by the time they come out, they're not any use to anybody.
So thank you. There was Alison Goldwald not being pessimistic. I see 2 flags. There may be more flags, and yes, if you could wave them if you're at the back, they're not necessarily so easy to see. 4. So I'll start with Brazil, and then UNSD, and then Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The history of ICT-related statistics production in Brazil is very close to the partnership history. It was launched in Brazil in 2004, and in this very same year, a joint effort with the NSO and the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, we decided to conduct the first household survey in 2004 using the framework set forth by the partnership. And since then, we are collecting regularly ICT data based on international standards like from UNCTAD, the business survey, household survey from the ITU framework. But what I would like to mention is that the commitment of 4 key stakeholders in this project is very relevant for us. We have the Minister of Communication, the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee and CETIC, the regulator, Anatel, and also the NSO. We work together to put a survey that makes sense for policymakers. And this engagement is, I would say, very important to produce data that are required by policymakers. Otherwise, we should spend huge amount of money and policymakers wouldn't use the data. And I also would like to mention that since the very beginning, we adopted practice to offer to policymakers and academics the access to the micro database. And since we have a very long historical series, it is possible to give to people that can make impact analysis using the micro databases in a very interesting way that will provide relevant information about the impact. For instance, a very good example is the example that the Institute for Applied Economic Research, which is linked to the federal government, they use our micro database on ICT in education to access the impact of the policies fostering ICT in education. Because although most public schools in Brazil have access to ICTs and broadband, about 85%, the impact in the teaching methods is very low. We lack teachers training in ICT for pedagogical purposes. So it is very important to offer the micro database to researchers to make impact assessment. And lastly, I would like to mention that we have here a delegate from the Ministry of Communication that has promoted, after 10 years of data collection, interministerial dialogue 2 weeks ago in Brasilia involving 7 ministries. It was a dialogue to understand the use of ICT statistics in policy making and action plans. So there was a whole day of discussion with a high-level ministries and secretariats in education, health, justice for child online protection. So we hope that this dialogue will be periodically so that policymakers then make really informed decision based on evidence. So this is the history of ICT statistics production in Brazil, and of course that in the region the partnership is very well known. I believe that countries in Latin America, most of them, they have at least a core list of ICT indicators, and everybody in the region that are related to statistics, they know the partnership. And I acknowledge that this is a very, very successful initiative, and I congratulate all the stakeholders in this initiative for this very well done job, and I hope that this will continue for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a number. I've seen a number of flags now, not all of which my eyes are good enough still to read. But what I'd like to say, the key question that was asked for the session is what should be the priorities for the partnership in the future? So if I could ask you to focus on that particular question and also to keep your interventions short. I've got about 6 interventions here. So I recognized UNST first, and then I'll come to Kenya, Iran, Cameroon. Yes,
thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you all presenters for your expositions. I will be short. The key, the major event for the near future is this post-2015 agenda. And I think for the partnership it will be very important to have the right ICT indicators inside of this post-2050 development agenda for the monitoring. This is directly related to funding. I think most of the funding for statistical capacity building will be very much focused on anything having to do with monitoring the indicators. There is also an additional attention to household surveys and trying to integrate household surveys, and I think ICT should try to be part of this, trying to at national level also to relate to the various institutes doing surveys, especially the National Statistical Offices as a coordination office. And finally, I think there was mentioned a few times about integration of statistical data. I think that's very important, especially to link this with poverty, education, and other indicators. But it should be done at the production level, not at the time when you have the outcome of surveys. So the survey should be the ones where you try to integrate this kinds of linking. Thank you very much.
And Kenya?
Thank you for the floor. I think for us, the main focus would be probably capacity building, particularly in the area of demand-side statistics. Just like Alison has put it, that in Africa that has been a major area that has dragged behind. But I would also want to put maybe a quick question to Alison, that you mentioned about 3 surveys that you wish to carry, one of which will be done in Kenya. Maybe you can, just expound or give much more information on exactly what the focus of this, demand-side service will be looking at. Thank you.
And Iran next, please.
Congratulations to partnership for the 10th anniversary, and thanks to the partnership. Actually, our country has used capacity building services and also other kinds of publications and knowledge that has been produced by the partnerships very much. And I think it's a very good idea to continue these successful initiatives. I think I want just to mention and reconfirm that in the Connect 2020 agenda for global telecom ICT development, there is a call upon member states to continue active engagement in ongoing discussions on the post-2015 development agenda, working with the UN Secretary General to ensure the important role of telecommunication ICT as a key enabler to achieve the MDGs, the post-2015 development agenda, and the sustainable development goals. And also, this agenda has instructed the Secretary General to monitor the progress towards the achievement of the Connect 2020 agenda. I think these are the main priorities for the partnership also, and because it has a direct mention. And I think another role of partnership is linking policy and statistical communities on measuring ICTs. It's very important in the countries, and also helping the countries to define specific ICT objectives and indicators for progressing towards national development goals, and defining new data sources, indicators for new and cross-cutting themes, such as content also is very important. I think it can be a good idea to continue on work, and also defining ICT for sustainable development. Indicators can be a good idea to work on it in the ICT, in the partnership. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to take Cameroon now and then GSMA.
Merci de me passer la parole. Je voudrais remercier l'UIT et ses partenaires pour les...
Give me a chance to express my standpoint. I would like to congratulate on this partnership program for the activities that they have carried out in terms of the ICT, which enable the Cameroon population to have very narrow relationship with the statistical agency. We have been working on this. We have been working with different organizations and bodies with different statistical agencies, which is enabler for us to go forward, to advance our positions. We also are conducting different opinion polls and interviews, which will give us an opportunity how the information technologies are being used. And afterwards, we are measuring these indicators, to what extent our population has access to the information technologies. When I hear out what you are saying when you are speaking on the post-2015 challenges, you sort of miss out the notion of the content, the satisfaction of the consumer, which is the point of departure, very important point of us. We have been conducting work, we have been conducting different activities, so we must have the different questions on which we can collaborate with these institutions, with the statistical institutions, and this work is to be performed from the scientific angle as well. Thank you very much.
Just ask anyone else who wishes to come in to wave their flags at me now, please. So I'll ask GSMA.
Thank you. I just want to make a short comment and congratulate the partnership on the achievements. I think there's a lot of similarities with the objectives that the GSM associations are looking at. In terms of priorities, I think the data collection from the demand side is very important. I think we discussed that in depth over the last couple of days. But I think something that is I think essential is to understand usage patterns when it comes to the everyday consumer. So usage patterns would be a key priority. And going back to what Mr. Barbosa was saying, I think it's very important to analyze the data as well. So understanding the impact that those patterns and those changes are having on policy and other trends within the industry. So it's not only about having the data, but actually making the analysis behind it. And from an industry perspective, we see that this really facilitates the advocacy debate, and this is very important to the mobile operator community as well. So congratulations again.
Okay, the only additional flag I saw was from Richard Heeks.
Thank you very much. We can divide the data life cycle into production, analysis, and use. And Jose said, I think one of the priorities for the partnership going forward should be to increase use, and then interpreted that in terms of increasing the analytical capacity of users. So my question is, should the partnership push even further downstream in the data cycle? So should it and could it work with user organizations to actually increase their decision making and their decision implementation capacity? Because I'm still slightly concerned that with this logjam notion that lots and lots of data being produced, potentially being analyzed, but then how do we make sure, how does the partnership make sure that that is really put into effective use that leads through into development results?
Okay, is there anybody else who wishes urgently to contribute from the floor? It's 6 o'clock. Now, if there isn't, what I propose to do is to invite any member of the panel who wishes to take a maximum of a minute to make the point that is at the top of their heads. So, who wishes to, and you come last. No, Susan comes last.
Okay, thank you, David. So I will try to answer your question. I fully think that the partnership should also work with the users. In fact, it's artificial to separate production from use of statistics. If there is no use, there is no sense for production. So, and in fact, there is a virtuous circle between from the use. Better use gives better statistics produced, and better statistics gives better use. So I think that the partnership is very well positioned also because as ITU is user data, ITUs and UNCTAD and the other, they are really close to users and they can perfectly work on increasing the capacity. Thank you.
Yes, actually just was wanting to enforce that. I mean, I think we've reached a point where we have to move beyond the rhetoric of evidence-based policy. And for decision makers actually to say, I cannot make this decision now because I don't have the data for this country to make that. And we know that this country is smaller or larger or landlocked or whatever it is that's going to make it different from somewhere else. So as I said, it's really about this ethos of information and evidence and statistics that particularly, I think we have a challenge in Africa, but I think there are other parts of the world too. And I think it's uneven across Africa as well. Which takes me quickly to the point, I think we can have an offline discussion on how we've landed up with the 3 countries that we have and where those negotiations are. I think the only thing that we can sort of salvage out of it is that what the demand side surveys have offered is after 10 years is the beginning of some kind of not longitudinal but sort of time series data. And that's what's the travesty of these coming to an end is that that's going to be lost. Fortunately, those 3 countries, Nigeria, Kenya and South Africa, have been in the household surveys from the beginning and the supply side analyses from the beginning. And so we'll hopefully be able to carry that through. We'll hopefully be able to leverage some other support for some other countries because although there's a lot of value in the historical data over a period of time to see how countries' policy outcomes are, a positive or impact effectively, whether they're having a positive or negative impact. Obviously, there's also enormous value in the comparative side of the index of the research, for countries in East Africa, for countries that are similar in West and East Africa that are comparable, etc. And those have been done in our comparative analyses in the past. So that's part of the loss. And part of the gain of coming in on it is that each country that's added to it, the greater the comparative value is there. So just by putting in a little bit, you get much more out of the pie.
Just a quick reaction to Richard's comment on your concern on whether there's too much data. I have to say from the UNCTAD perspective, there is very, very, very little data right now, especially from developing countries on the information economy, and that would be ICT used by enterprises and ICT sector. And there is a growing interest from countries themselves on data, also on the international trade of ICT services, which we hope to be contributing to. So I don't think that we have enough data yet, especially from developing countries. I think we have to keep pushing for these core indicators. At the same time, acknowledge that there are countries that are at different levels now, that they have produced data, that they have a further interest in deepening that analysis, and then also try to branch out in that sense. And I think the partnership would also, using the example of our own scheme of being partners and sharing resources and reaching out to others to find out how they are using data for research, I think we can continue exploring that. And that's my very, very quick thought. I could speak for a long time.
Thank you very much also for the very good suggestions. I just have a very short comment also on the discussion we just had on bringing in the users, which I think is a very important aspect. We have had some discussions on that in the partnership and also in ITU on that, and we have tried to work towards that in different avenues. One is what I mentioned earlier, the issue of promoting and raising awareness on at the national level for national coordination when we work with countries or do capacity building, to bring in also representatives from the ministries and other data users who could be part of the discussion on the production and analysis of statistics. Another one is that some of the task groups of the partnership involve other members that are not members of the partnership but are also representing some of the users. So when we discuss the issues, that we also hear about the demand for the data. And finally, this meeting here, as you have seen, we had on the first day, we had high-level policy representation. In the meeting, some of the policymakers have stayed with us throughout. Tomorrow we are presenting some of the analysis of the report. This is another way of how we are trying to bridge between the data producers and the data users and get feedback from all different stakeholders, and we are trying to promote this in the future further. So with this, I would like to thank everybody for the suggestions on behalf of the partnership. We will discuss those internally. If you have further ideas, please don't hesitate to contact either UNCTAD, myself. Let me also recognize the presence of 2 other members of the partnership, the UNESCO Institute for Statistics and also the World Bank. Please feel free to talk to us or get back to us later on, and thank you again very much. Thank you.
Well, I think Susan's more or less summed up the session. Effectively, there have been some very interesting issues raised, and maybe I'll just mention a few of the words that are in front of me here that one might comment on. The comprehensiveness of data and the need to have a greater extent and comprehensiveness of data, the need for quality, relevance, timeliness, and the other aspects of the data quality assurance framework that Michael College was talking about earlier, the diversity of data sources and the potential for engaging across the traditional source boundaries between public and private sources of data, and collaboration in those sorts of areas. The fact that ICT data do not stand alone, but they're part of the much wider sets of development data sets, and the scope for much more linkage of those two, and understanding of impact. And finally, the point about, if you like, the 3 stages of data gathering, data analysis, and data use. Those would seem to be the kind of themes that emerged from here, and I think the partnership has great potential to go from what it's done so far to build on that work and do great things in the future. So thank you very much for making up the 45 minutes we lost at the start of the session. We're just within that time, and I'll now hand you back to the chair to close today's meeting.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we have very efficient day, and congratulations to the moderators and panelists to provide very interesting information. I think it will be very useful for you. Tomorrow we are starting our session at 9 a.m. I would like to provide you information also that the guests who's living in other hotels, transportation is arranged for you, and you can apply at the receptions once the conference is over. And also I would like to wish you a nice evening and enjoy if you are not so tired at the sightseeing of Tbilisi. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow. Bye.